Story 1 by Murky 600. This story is from my sister when we visited the Queen Mary back in the 1970s. Much confusion over the years, so I asked her to write her part down. She was in the second grade, and still very much in the early stages of learning how to read. We were standing shoulder to shoulder with our hands on the outside railing of the Queen Mary's outside deck, looking out toward the ocean. We'd left our mom and dad to run over to see more of the ocean view. We stopped at a nice open and quiet spot. No one was close by to where we were standing to view the ocean harbor. In the near distance was an airplane towing a banner advertising an upcoming beach concert. We stood there and were trying to sound out loud the words on the banner and going very slowly as a beginning reader. After a short time of you struggling to read the banner out loud, I heard a woman's voice right behind the two of us. For just half a second, I thought Mom had come up behind us, but then realized the voice wasn't hers. This friendly-sounding woman was gently sounding out the next syllable every time I stopped reading out loud, since I was having trouble reading the banner. The woman sounded quite nice and was gently helping us along whenever we came to any hard combination of letters. My sister followed suit in perfect timing with her instruction, but by the end of the banner's message, though, I lost patience and I spoke out loud the very last syllable. At that same moment, I was turning around to smile and thank the woman for her help, but was confronted with a, "Whoops, this can't be." There was absolutely no one behind us. I continued to look behind us where the helpful woman should have been, but no one in that entire section of open deck was near us. Also, there weren't any places for anyone to duck and hide. That was too spooky for me. I decided we'd better go back inside to find our parents. Funny thing is, I remember the lady standing next to me before my sister arrived. A gray-haired, small, older woman. She had 1940s type of formal flower dress, purse, maybe gloves. She was going on about what a beautiful ship this was and how much she enjoys it. She asked me, "Don't you think so?" I was a polite kid, so I said, "Yeah, it's neat." I was busy looking at the other ships in the harbor when my sister arrived and the above narrative took place. Maybe it was all just our different interpretations, or the spirit of that lady had such a good memory of Queen Mary she wanted to visit it one more time. Story 2 by Murky 600. It was a dark and cold Christmas night in northern Minnesota. I was enjoying the holiday with friends and family. It was a typical winter night with temperatures well below zero outside. My aunt and uncle's home was very old and haunted. My cousin would always have stories about strange things always happening around the house. Also, my aunt would tell you, yes, it has spirits. They all have their own stories. I was about 17, and visiting from California, my dad decides to spend the holidays in his hometown. Opening presents at midnight was always our family custom. I was sitting on the carpet in the family room, laughing at something, family get-togethers. Suddenly there was a loud boom from the dining room, which was really just the dining table on the far side of the room. It sounded like a heavy slab of wood fell over. I turned quickly to the right and saw a low dark shape speed out of sight from under table and into kitchen. It was black with a kind of dark orange fur stripe, sort of, I thought. The cat knocked over a box or something and ran into the kitchen. They had a calico cat named Topsy that was semi-feral and a little evil, but that's also another story. The fur color of what I saw would be sort right. Everyone was looking around asking, "What the hell was that?" "That was the cat," I said. "I saw her bolt into the kitchen. Zoom, must have knocked something over." "Can't be Topsy," said my aunt. "She's over here." Sure enough, the evil cat was sleeping by the front window near my uncle. I was suddenly confused, as was everyone else. "Then what did I see?" I asked. I went over to the table, but nothing had fallen over. There was nothing on the table or floor. Also, the chairs were where they were supposed to be. It was so strange I asked my family if they saw anything, but no one else did. I know that everyone heard it. I told them exactly what I saw, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me, which is odd since I was 17 and with perfect vision. Years later, I learned of shadow people and things that go bump in the night. One paranormal writer wrote of a similar experience while investigating a haunted restaurant. Right in front of him, a loud thud and a dark shape that ran through the closed door to the restaurant's kitchen. The door never moved. Yup, I thought. Sounds about right. By Murky 600. My story is about a farm I visited when I was younger. The farm was located in a very remote part of India where religion, man-made or faith-based, was absent. It was obvious that there was nothing but farmland around for miles. You would have to drive off the property for at least 10 minutes to be near your neighbors. We got there, dinner was served around the table, and everyone was advised to be in bed by 10. The host at the farm politely added, "No matter what you hear, it's essential that you stay in your room. Do not leave your room after midnight." The night went on and conversation carried into the early morning, but we stayed in our room. It was 2:04 a.m. There was light chatter in the room when everyone stopped and looked around when they heard this singing coming from the darkness outside the fence of the property. A young lady, without a doubt, was singing alone in the black darkness at 2:04 a.m., and although beautiful, her song sounded like she was heartbroken. What followed was just as strange. For some context, there is a genre of Indian dancing in which the dancers have bells strapped to their ankles, very similar to sleigh bells or jingle bells. The movement of the dancer adds dynamic to the sound these bells make. And here is the important part. The noise it makes is described and written as chum-chum. Back to the story. What followed the singing was the sound of chum-chums. The only thing we were all hearing in the dead of night was her voice, shaking, trembling. Her voice was so beautiful, sad, and haunting at the same time, while also having the rhythm of the chum-chums. We looked out into the darkness and felt the darkness looking back at us. I couldn't see a thing, and it was very hard to identify where the sound was coming from. We found our beds, and eventually went off ensuring the door was locked after we went to sleep. This continued on for the next 3 nights to follow, but the sound grew closer and closer to the dwelling where we were residing. On the final night that we were meant to stay there, my father didn't hold back his words and asked our host to elaborate on his request to stay in our rooms at night, no matter what we hear. The host took a deep breath and told us that about 2 years ago, a family of 4 lived on that land. A father, mother, and their 2 daughters. The father was locked into generational family conflicts over money, land, and inheritance. The story goes that family members who had come to visit the house went into their dwelling and hung the mother and the 2 children. That night, neighbors reported hearing the chum-chums or the bells because the girls were dancing for the family earlier that night as per their parents' request. They went to bed with these bells on their feet. When life slipped out of them slowly, they kicked and thrashed the bells off into the darkness. The neighbors heard them because they were brought out into the area where we were staying. After they were hung in the field, the father was spared, as he woke up the next morning with no one around. He went looking for his family. Locals state that he was found by their side with very little flesh on his bones. The Mets determined that he had starved to death at the feet of his daughters and wife bodies. The assumption is that he had lost everything once they were taken away from him. The local urban legend states that the bells are heard late into the night because the girls still wander those parts hoping someone would hear them and release them from their suffering. After hearing this, I asked my parents to leave that night, and we did. They felt the same way I did. About a month later, we found out that the dwelling where we were residing at and the living quarters was where the event happened to the farmer's family. This could be unrelated to the first part of the story, but hearing that singing at 2:00 a.m. in the darkness with no one around for miles has haunted me since that day. I always hope that the souls of these young women and their parents find peace in the afterlife. Story 4. One night while sleeping over at my dad's house, I ended up falling asleep on the couch in the living room. At some point, I woke up in the middle of the night to a dark shadow figure standing in front of my bedroom door, which was downstairs down the hall. The bathroom is right next to her room. The figure stands there for a few seconds, then disappears into the bathroom. I asked my dad about the encounter, but he claimed he didn't get up that night. My second experience was a few months later. I was watching TV in the living room with my little brother. As it got later in the night, we decided to go to our bedrooms. I can still remember the way my toys were lined up on the dresser in front of me and how the streetlight was shining in through the window. All of a sudden, my bed began to shake violently side to side. Then it shook so hard I was holding onto the sheets for fear of falling off the bed. It was so scary, I pulled the blankets over my head and cried as the bed continued to shake. It lasted for a few minutes until I felt the bed slowly stop moving. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I came out from under the blanket when I saw sunlight. My brother and dad were in the kitchen, and I proceeded to ask them if they heard anything last night, which they both said no. I told them my experience, and they were both speechless. Eventually, my dad would see these shadows throughout the house, hanging out by the window or at the end of the hallway. Sometimes they'll touch you on the shoulder, or you can feel them walk behind you. We learned to live with these spirits.